The transport ship shook as it dropped out of hyperspace. Kim Taho pressed his face against the small window and saw something that made his breath catch. The Galactic Defense Academy hung in space like a massive metal city. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen, bigger than the space stations around Earth, bigger than the mining platforms on Mars. Taho was 19 years old. He was also the first human ever accepted into the Academy. This fact made his stomach twist with worry. "Attention passengers," came a voice through the ship's speakers. The voice belonged to a Saurid, one of the lizard-like aliens who ran most of the transport services. "We are arriving at Helios Academy Station. Human passenger, please remain seated until all other passengers have left the ship." Taho felt his cheeks burn with shame. Even here, even before he had stepped foot on the Academy, he was being treated differently. The other passengers on the ship had not spoken to him during the 3-day journey. They had stared at him, though. He could feel their eyes on him. Whenever he moved, there were 12 different alien species represented at the Academy. Taho had studied them all during his flight. The Saurids looked like walking crocodiles, but were incredibly smart. The Orcs were warriors with 4 arms and skin like metal armor. The Ethereals were beings made of pure energy who could barely hold physical form. Each species had sent their best and brightest to the Academy for over 300 years. Humans had never been invited before. The ship docked with a soft thud. Taho watched through his window as the other passengers filed out. A group of young Orcs pushed each other playfully. Their metal skin clinked when they touched. A single ethereal floated past, its form shifting between blue and white light. 2 aquatic beings in environment suits moved with careful, flowing steps. None of them looked back at him. Finally, the transport crew gestured for Taho to leave. He grabbed his single bag and walked to the airlock. The moment he stepped onto the station, he felt the difference in gravity. It was slightly heavier than Earth normal, but his body adjusted quickly. The docking bay was huge. Ships of different sizes and shapes filled the space. Some looked like Earth vessels, all angles and metal, while others were smooth and organic, grown, rather than built. In the distance, Taho could see what looked like a ship made entirely of crystal. "You are the human." Taho turned. A massive Saurid stood behind him. The alien was nearly 7 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to look right through him. Military marks covered his uniform. "Yes, sir," Taho said. "I am Kim Taho. I am Instructor Vextar." The Saurid's voice was deep and rough. "I am your training officer. You will follow me." Vextar turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. Taho hurried to keep up. The instructor's legs were much longer than his. Taho had to take 2 steps for every one of Vextar's. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of white metal that gleamed under the lights. Taho saw other cadets moving through the halls. All of them stopped to stare when they saw him. Some pointed. Others made sounds in their alien languages that Taho was sure were not compliments. "The Academy has trained warriors for 347 years, Vextar said as they walked. "In that time, only the strongest have survived too. Graduation, the weak are sent home. The very weak do not survive at all." Taho felt a chill run down his spine. "How many cadets don't survive?" Vextar's yellow eyes glanced down at him. "On average, 30% die during training. Another 40% are sent home as failures. Only 30% earn the right to serve in the Galactic Defense Force." They entered a large circular room with a high ceiling. Hundreds of cadets filled the space, all sitting in neat rows. At the center of the room stood a creature that made Taho's skin crawl. It looked like a giant insect standing on 2 legs. Its head was triangular, with compound eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. 4 thin arms moved constantly as it spoke. "That is Commander Killanara," Vextar said quietly. "She is the Academy Director. She is also the one who decided to accept you into our program." "She doesn't look happy about it," Taho whispered. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. "She is not. The decision came from the Galactic Council. Politics, not merit." They found seats near the back of the room. Teho tried to make himself small as hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at him. The whispers started immediately. He could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. They were talking about him, and they were not impressed. Commander. Killanara raised one of her forearms, and the room fell silent. When she spoke, her voice buzzed like an angry wasp. Cadets, she began. You are here because your species believes you are the best they have to offer. You are here because you think you have what it takes to protect the galaxy from threats that would destroy entire worlds? She paused, and her compound eyes seemed to look directly at Teho. Most of you are wrong. The room was so quiet that Teho could hear his own heartbeat. The universe is not safe, Killanara continued. There are things in the dark spaces between. Stars that would eat your homeworlds for breakfast. There are ancient enemies that sleep between galaxies, waiting for the right moment to wake up and finish what they started long ago. The Galactic Defense Force exists to stand against these threats. She began to pace, her forearms moving in complex patterns as she spoke. But the galaxy is changing. New species are joining our alliance. Some of these species come from what we call death worlds, planets so dangerous that simply surviving childhood makes them strong. Her eyes fixed on Teho again. Today we welcome our first cadet from Earth. Humans call their world peaceful, but we know better. Earth is a death world. Its gravity is crushing. Its weather is violent. Its native life forms are designed to kill and eat each other. Any species that evolves on such a world must be strong. Teho felt hundreds of alien eyes studying him with new interest. Some looked curious. Others looked worried. The question, Killanara said, is whether this strength will be enough. The orientation continued for another hour, but Teho barely heard the rest. He was thinking about his sister, Sora, who had died in the Mars colony raids 5 years ago. She had been only 16 when the pirates hit their settlement. Teho had found her body 3 days later. That was why he was here. That was why. He had volunteered for the academy when Earth received the invitation. Someone had to make sure that families like his were protected. When the orientation ended, Vextar led him to his quarters. The room was small and basic. A bed, a desk, a closet, and a small window that looked out at the stars. Classes begin at dawn, Vextar said. Do not be late. Do not be weak. And do not embarrass your species more than you already have by being. Here, the instructor left, and Teho was alone. He sat on his bed and looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there were people counting on him to become strong enough to protect them. He had no idea that some of the other cadets were already planning to make sure he failed. Outside his door, Instructor Vextar paused. There was something about the human that bothered him. The boy was small and quiet, like prey. But there was something in his eyes, something that made Vextar's predator instincts whisper warnings. The human smelled wrong. He smelled like something pretending to be harmless. Teho woke up before dawn. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear whispers in the hallway outside his room. Alien voices speaking in languages he did not understand, but the tone was always the same. They were talking. About him, he got dressed in the gray training uniform that had been left on his desk. The fabric felt strange against his skin, too smooth, like it was made from some kind of synthetic material that did not exist on Earth. The corridor was empty when he stepped outside. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he made his way to the training center. He had studied the academy map late into the night, memorizing every corridor and room. Getting lost on his first day would only give the other cadets more reasons to laugh at him. The training center was a massive room with a ceiling so high that Teho could barely see it. Strange equipment filled the space, things that looked like they belonged in a torture chamber rather than a gym. Other cadets were already there, stretching and preparing for the day's exercises, the moment Teho entered. All conversations stopped. A Orcs cadet stepped forward. He was tall, even for his species, with 4 muscular arms and metal-colored skin that gleamed under the lights. Scars covered his forearms in neat patterns that Teho recognized as battle marks from his studies. So, the Orcs said in perfect Earth standard, "This is the famous human. My name is Kim Taeho, Taeho said quietly. The Orcs laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. I am Ralvin of the 3rd War Clutch. My family has served in the defense force for 12 generations. We have died protecting worlds that your species has never even heard of. More cadets gathered around them. Taeho could see representatives from at least 6 different species. All of them looked hostile. And you, Ralvin continued, come from a world so backward that you still fight wars with chemical explosives. What makes the council think you belong here? Before Taeho could answer, Instructor Vextar's voice boomed across the training center. Cadets, form ranks for morning assessment. The crowd dispersed quickly. Taeho found a spot at the back of the formation and tried to make himself invisible. It did not work. He could feel eyes on him from every direction. Vextar began the morning with basic exercises, push-ups, running, lifting weights. Taeho had trained for months before coming to the academy, but he quickly realized that his preparation had not been enough. Other cadets were stronger, faster, and more skilled than anything he had expected. But something strange happened as the morning went on. While the other species excelled in short bursts of activity, they began to tire after an hour. Taeho, on the other hand, felt like he was just getting started. When Ralvin collapsed after his 5th set of weightlifting, Taeho was still going. When a group of sword cadets had to stop running after 30 minutes, Taeho kept pace with the automatic track. By the end of the Toar session, half the cadets were lying on the floor, gasping for breath. Taeho was still standing. Vextar approached him with a puzzled expression. Human, how do you feel? Fine, sir, Taeho said honestly. Little tired, but fine. The instructor's yellow eyes narrowed. The other species require rest periods during extended physical activity. Their bodies cannot handle prolonged stress without recovery time. I can keep going if you need me to, sir. Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a note on his datapad and walked away. The afternoon brought a different kind of training. Dr. Hilandra, the Academy's chief psychologist, led them to a sterile white room filled with strange machines. Dr. Hilandra looked like a tall, slim human, but her skin was pale blue and her eyes were solid silver. She belonged to a species called the Mentar, who were known for their powerful psychic abilities. Today we test your mental defenses, she announced. In combat, you will face enemies who can attack your mind as well as your body. Those with weak mental barriers will not survive. She gestured to a chair surrounded by complex machinery. Who wants to go first? Ralvin immediately volunteered. He sat in the chair and Dr. Hilandra activated the machines. Lights began to flash in complex patterns, while sounds played at frequencies that made Taeho's ears ache. Ralvin lasted 12 minutes before he started screaming. When they pulled him out of the chair, his eyes were wide with terror and his forearms were shaking. Acceptable, Dr. Hilandra noted. Next, one by one, the cadets took their turns. The longest anyone lasted was 18 minutes, a crystalline being whose mind worked in ways that the machines had trouble affecting. Most lasted less than 10 minutes. Finally, it was Taeho's turn. He sat in the chair and tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming. The machines hummed to life around him. At first, nothing happened. Then the lights began to flash, and sounds filled his ears. But instead of the torture he expected, Taeho felt something else entirely. Calm. The flashing lights reminded him of the aurora he had seen as a child during a trip to Alaska. The sounds were like the wind through the trees near his family's cabin. Instead of attacking his mind, the machines seemed to be putting him into a meditative state. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. Dr. Hilandra began to look concerned. She increased the intensity of the machines. The lights flashed faster. The sounds grew louder. Other cadets in the room began to back away. Covering their ears, Taeho sat perfectly still, his eyes closed, breathing slowly and evenly. After 2 hours, Dr. Hilandra turned off the machines. Taeho opened his eyes and looked around the room. Every other cadet was staring at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. How do you feel? Dr. Hilandra asked. Relaxed, Taeho said. Thank you. It was actually quite pleasant. The doctor made several notes on her datapad, then dismissed the class. As the other cadets filed out, Tejo heard them whispering. The words were in different languages, but he could guess what they were saying. What kind of creature was not affected by psychological torture? That evening, Tejo was eating dinner alone in the cafeteria when someone sat down across from him. This was another human, the first he had seen since arriving at the academy. "Hi," the newcomer said. "I'm Bei Jinwoo. I just arrived this afternoon." Tejo looked up in surprise. Jinwoo appeared to be a few years older, with the kind of easy smile that made people want to trust him. "I didn't know there were other humans coming." "There are 12 of us total," Jinwoo said. "They're spacing out our arrivals so we don't cause too much disruption. I'm supposed to be a communications specialist." "I heard what happened in Dr. Halandra's class today," Jinwoo continued. "The whole station is talking about it." Tejo felt his cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I just tried to stay calm. It's for 2 hours under psychic assault." Jinwoo shook his head. "That's not normal, brother. That's not human normal." Before Tejo could respond, a group of Orcs cadets approached their table. Ralvin was in the lead, and he did not look happy. "Human," Ralvin said, his voice loud enough to carry across the cafeteria. "You made me look weak today." Tejo started to stand, but Jinwoo put a hand on his arm. "Let's not cause trouble on my first day," he said, quietly. But Ralvin was not interested in avoiding trouble. One of his forearms shot out and grabbed Jinwoo by the shirt, lifting him out of his chair. "I wasn't talking to you, communications boy." Something changed in Tejo's expression. The calm, quiet demeanor disappeared, replaced by something cold. And focused, he stood up slowly. "Put him down," Tejo said. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried clearly through the noise of the cafeteria. Ralvin laughed. "Or what, human? You'll bore me to death with your meditation." Tejo took a step forward, then another. With each step, his movements became more fluid, more controlled. The other cadets in the cafeteria began to take notice. Conversations stopped. Even the alien staff members paused in their work to watch. "Put him down." There was something in Tejo's voice, now that made Ralvin's warrior instincts send up warning signals. The human was small and appeared harmless, but predators recognized other predators, even when they were trying to hide. Ralvin released Jinwoo and took a step back. "This isn't over, human." As the Orcs group walked away, Jinwoo rubbed his throat and stared at Tejo in amazement. "Where did that come from?" he asked. Tejo sat back down, his expression returning to its normal, quiet calm. "I don't know," he said honestly, but deep down, something was stirring. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Across. The cafeteria instructor Vexstar watched from the shadows. He had seen the entire encounter, and what he had witnessed confirmed his growing suspicions. The human was definitely not what he appeared to be. 3 days after the cafeteria incident, everything changed. Tae-Ho was walking back to his quarters after evening training. When he heard sounds of a struggle from a side corridor, he recognized Jinwoo's voice calling for help. He ran toward the sound and found Jinwoo surrounded by 6 cadets from different species. Ralvin stood in the center, all 4 of his arms crossed over his chest. Jinwoo's lip was bleeding, and his uniform was torn. "What's happening here?" Tejo asked. "Just teaching your friend about academy traditions," Ralvin said with a cruel smile. "New cadets need to learn their place. His place is as a student, same as everyone else." "Wrong," said one of the sword cadets. "Humans don't belong here. You're weak, you're primitive, and you're going to get real warriors killed." Tried to stand, but one of the aliens pushed him back down. That was when something inside Tejo snapped. He moved faster than anyone expected. One moment he was standing at the entrance to the corridor, the next he was beside the sword who had pushed Jinwoo. His fist connected with the alien's throat. In a precise strike that sent the much larger creature crashing into the wall, the other attackers rushed him at once. What happened next would be talked about in whispers for weeks. Tejo moved like he had been training in combat his entire life. He dodged attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. His counter-strikes hit pressure points that dropped opponents twice his size. In less than 30 seconds, all 6 Aliens were on the ground, groaning in pain. Ralvin was the last to fall. The proud Orcs warrior lay on his back, staring up at Tejo with shock and fear in his eyes. "How?" Ralvin whispered. "How did you do that?" Tejo looked down at his own hands as if he had never seen them before. They were steady, but he could feel power running through them like electricity. "I don't know." Security arrived within minutes. The injured cadets were taken to the medical bay. Tejo and Ginwu were escorted to Commander Killinara's office. The insectoid commander studied them with her compound eyes, while Instructor Vexstar stood silent in the corner. 6 injured cadets," Killinara said, her voice buzzing with anger. 3 of them are in serious condition. All of them defeated by a single human who claims to have no advanced combat training. They attacked Jinwu, Tejo said. I was defending him. Defense does not explain your skill level, Vexter interrupted. Those were trained warriors from martial species. You should not have been able to defeat even one of them, let alone all 6. Killinara leaned forward. There will be an investigation. Until then, both of you are confined to quarters. But the next morning brought worse news. Jinwu was found unconscious in his room, foam around his mouth. Someone had poisoned his food during the night. That was when Commander Killinara made her decision. Human has become a disruptive influence, she announced to Vexstar and the other instructors. Traditional discipline methods are not working. We will implement the cage protocols. Dr. Hilandra looked concerned. Commander, the cage protocols are designed for the most dangerous criminals. The longest anyone has ever lasted is 72 hours. Most species break within 48. Then the human will learn his limitations quickly. Killinar replied. The cage was located in the deepest part of the Academy station. It was a small room, barely large enough for a person to lie down, with walls made of smooth metal that reflected. No light. There were no windows, no sounds from outside, no way to tell time. Tejo was stripped of his uniform and given simple gray clothing. As the heavy door sealed shut behind him, complete darkness and silence surrounded him. The psychological isolation will break his will, Dr. Hilandra explained to the monitoring staff. Humans are social creatures. They need contact with others to maintain mental stability. For the first day, Tejo paced the small space and tried to stay calm. He thought about Jinwu in the medical bay, fighting for his life. He thought about his sister Sora and how she had always been braver than him. On the second day, he began to hear voices. Not real voices. His mind was starting to play tricks on him. This was normal, according to the monitors. All species experienced auditory hallucinations and complete sensory deprivation. But Tejo's voices were different. They spoke in a language he had never learned, yet somehow understood. They told him stories about stars and worlds and wars fought long before Earth was even discovered by the galactic community. On the third day, the voices became clearer. Remember, they whispered, remember who you were before the sleeping? Sat in the center of the small room and closed his eyes. The voices guided him into a meditation deeper than anything he had experienced before. In his mind, he began to see images. A young version of himself, but not himself. Boy who looked like him, but lived on a world that was not Earth. The boy was running through ruins while explosions lit up the sky. He was hiding in bombed-out buildings, drinking rainwater, and eating whatever he could find. The boy was alone for weeks. His family was dead. Everyone he knew was dead. But he survived because something inside him was stronger than fear, stronger than hunger, stronger than the alien raiders who had destroyed his home. Wait, alien raiders? But Tejo was human, and this was his memory. How could there be alien raiders in his past? The memories became clearer. The boy himself had survived by learning to hunt. Not animals, but the raiders themselves. He had tracked them through. The ruins learned their habits, killed them one by one with traps and ambushes. By the 4th day in the cage, Tejo was no longer pacing or sitting. He was standing perfectly still in the center of the room, his eyes closed, breathing so slowly that the monitors thought their equipment was malfunctioning. His heart rate is almost undetectable. one technician reported. Brain activity is strange, said another. Parts of his mind that were dormant before are now extremely active. Dr. Hilandra studied the readings with growing alarm. These patterns don't match any known human brain activity. On the 5th day, Tejo began to speak, but he was not speaking Earth Standard or any other language in the galactic database. The words were old, ancient, and carried power in them that made the monitoring equipment spark and flicker. What is he saying? Kilanara demanded. The linguist on duty shook her head. I don't recognize the language. It's not in any of our records. By the 7th day, the monitoring equipment was failing completely. Lights flickered throughout that section of the station. Temperature sensors gave impossible readings. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. Te-Ho stood in the center of the cage. It's no longer the quiet, uncertain boy who had arrived at the academy. His posture was different, straighter, more confident. When he opened his eyes, they seemed to glow with inner light. He was remembering. The memories were not his own, but they belonged to him anyway. They belonged to all humans, buried deep in their genetic code and locked away by conscious choice long ago. Memories of an empire that had spanned the galaxy. Memories of power that could crack planets and weapons that could extinguish stars. Memories of a war so terrible that the victors had chosen to forget who they were rather than become the monsters their enemies claimed they were. Humans had not evolved on Earth. Earth had been their prison, their self-imposed exile. They had wiped their own memories and lived as primitives for thousands of years, slowly forgetting the terrible things they were capable of. But the memories were still there, waiting, and now, one by one, they were beginning to wake up. On the 10th day, alarms began blaring throughout the academy. The cage door, which had been designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy, was starting to buckle outward. From inside came the sound of ancient words, spoken in a voice that no longer sounded entirely human. Te-Ho was no longer just remembering. He was becoming what he had always been underneath the careful layers of civilized behavior and voluntary amnesia. He was becoming something that had once made the galaxy tremble, and the cage that was supposed to break him was about to become the first casualty in humanity's return to power. The cage door exploded outward with a sound like thunder. Tejo stepped through the twisted metal as if it were made of paper. But he was no longer the same person who had entered 10 days earlier. He moved with perfect balance, his eyes scanning the corridor with predatory awareness. Every muscle in his body was relaxed, yet ready for violence. The security team that had been waiting outside the cage took one look at him and stepped backward. Stand down, human, ordered the lead guard, a massive Orcs with military decorations. Covering his chest, return to containment immediately. Tejo tilted his head slightly, studying the guard like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. No. The single word carried such quiet authority that several guards actually took another step back. Their instincts were screaming warnings that their minds could not understand. Commander Kilanara arrived with reinforcements just as the first guard tried to use his stun weapon. Tejo moved before the weapon could fire. His hand closed around the guard's wrist with crushing force, and the alien dropped to his knees with a cry of pain. Enough. Kilanara shouted. Sedate him. 3 guards fired sedative darts simultaneously. Each dart contained enough tranquilizer to drop a full-grown Saurid. All 3 hit Tejo in the chest. He pulled them out one by one and let them fall to the floor. The drugs that should have knocked him unconscious had no effect at all. Interesting. Tejo said, Your chemicals don't work on my biology anymore. Dr. Hilandra pushed through the crowd of guards, her scanner beeping frantically as she pointed it at Tejo. Commander, his genetic structure is changing. This isn't the same human who entered the cage. I'm exactly who I've always been, Tejo replied. I just remember now. He began walking toward the main corridor, and the crowd of aliens parted before him like water. No one wanted to get too close to the human who had torn apart a reinforced door with his bare hands. In the medical bay, Jinwoo was awake, but weak. The poison had nearly killed him, but human biology had proved surprisingly resilient. When Taeho entered the room, Jinwoo tried to sit up. "You look different," Jinwoo said quietly. Taeho sat beside the medical bed. "How much do you remember about Earth's history?" "What do you mean?" "The oldest records. The stories that don't quite make sense. The ruins they found buried under the ice in Antarctica. The artifacts that don't match any known human technology." Jinwoo frowned. "Those are just mysteries. It's probably from some lost civilization." "They're from us," Taeho said simply. "From what we used to be before we chose to forget." Before Jinwoo could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the academy. Emergency lights flashed red as a voice announced, "All cadets report to emergency stations. This is not a drill." The Ho and Jinwoo made their way to the main assembly hall, where chaos was erupting. Hundreds of cadets from different species were talking at once. Their voices rising in panic, Commander Killinara stood at the center of the room, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "Attention, cadets, have received urgent communications from across the galaxy. Human settlements everywhere are reporting ... unusual activity." She activated a holographic display that showed dozens of star systems. Red warning markers appeared over human colonies and outposts. "In the last 6 hours," Killinara continued, "human populations on 17 different worlds have begun exhibiting enhanced physical and mental abilities. Some appear to have developed resistance to standard weapons. Others are demonstrating knowledge of technologies that should not exist." The alien cadets began to mutter nervously among themselves. Several looked directly at Taeho with fear in their eyes. "Furthermore," Killinara said, "our deep space sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace toward known human territories. The sources appear to be ships of unknown design and impossible size." A new voice spoke from the back of the room. "Those aren't unknown designs." Everyone turned to see an elderly human in civilian clothes walking through the crowd. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and the kind of steady presence that commanded respect. "Who are you?" Killinara demanded. "Archivist Veltar," the man replied. "Keeper of the Forbidden Records. And I know exactly what those ships are." The alien cadets pressed closer, eager to hear his explanation. But Veltar's eyes were fixed on Taeho. "You've started remembering, haven't you, son?" Taeho nodded slowly. "Pieces, images. A war that ended with victory so terrible that the winners chose to become prisoners instead of rulers. The exile protocols," Veltar said sadly. "Your species' greatest act of mercy toward the galaxy. When the war ended and your enemies lay defeated, humans had 2 choices: rule as conquerors or disappear. Entirely, you chose a third option." He gestured to the holographic display. "You wiped your own memories and scattered 2 primitive worlds, leaving only a few guardians to watch and wait. Earth was just one of many prison planets where humans volunteered to live as refugees from their own power." Rolvan, who had been listening from across the room, pushed forward. "You're saying humans once ruled the galaxy? Ruled it, built it, and then abandoned it when they realized what they had become?" Veltar confirmed. "Every piece of technology you use, every hyperspace route you travel, every peaceful treaty between species, all of it was designed by humans before they chose exile." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "But why are they remembering now?" Dr. Halandra asked. Veltar's expression grew dark. "Because the enemy your ancestors defeated is returning. The deep space sensors aren't just detecting human ships awakening from hidden stasis. They're also picking up signals from beyond the galactic rim." The holographic display zoomed out to show the entire galaxy. At its edge, tiny red dots were appearing, dozens of them, then hundreds. "The Devourers," Veltar whispered. "The ancient enemy that drove humans to become an empire in the first place. They consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space behind. They were defeated once, but never destroyed. They've been waiting in the dark between galaxies, growing stronger. Now they're coming back," Taeho said. It wasn't a question. Somehow he already knew. "The human awakening isn't random," Veltar explained. "It's an automatic response built into your genetic code. When the Devourers return, humans remember who they really are." Jinwoo struggled to his feet, his face pale. How many of us are there? How many humans are out there remembering? Billions, Veltar said. Scattered across thousands of worlds, all beginning to access memories and abilities they never knew they had. Within days, maybe hours, they'll start moving toward assembly points that have been waiting empty for millennia. Commander Killinara's voice was barely a whisper. What does this mean for the rest of us? Tejo stood and walked to the center of the room. Every eye followed him. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded starfleets and decided the fate of worlds. It means, he said quietly, that the children we've been protecting for the last 1,000 years are about to see their guardians. Take off the chains. He looked around the room at all the different species, the proud Orcs, the intelligent Saurids, the ethereal energy beings. You've all lived in the ruins of our civilization, thinking you built it yourselves. You've used our technology, followed our trade routes, and lived under the protection of systems we put in place before we chose to forget. And now, Ralvin asked, his forearms trembling slightly. Tejo's expression was sad but determined. Now we remember why we became an empire in the first place. Not to conquer, but to protect. The Devourers are coming, and someone has to stand between them and everything we've all built together. Outside the academy, space began to shimmer. Massive shapes were dropping out of hyperspace ships the size of small moons, their hulls bearing designs that were impossibly ancient yet somehow familiar. The human fleet was awakening, and with it, the apex predator that had once ruled the galaxy was stretching and preparing to hunt again. But this time, it wouldn't be hunting to conquer. They would be hunting to defend the children who had never known they were living under the protection of sleeping giants. The academy shook as the first human warship appeared directly above the station. It was massive, larger than anything in the galactic fleet. Its hull gleamed with a metal that seemed to bend light around it. Through the observation windows, cadets and instructors watched in stunned silence as more ships materialized from hyperspace. Within minutes, a fleet of hundreds surrounded the academy station. By the void, whispered a Saurid instructor. Where did they come from? They've been waiting, Tejo said simply. Hidden in deep space, programmed to activate when the awakening began. A new voice echoed through the academy's communication system. It was human, speaking in Earth standard, but with an authority that made everyone stop what they were doing to listen. Academy personnel, this is Admiral Park Hyunsu of the Earth. Defense Fleet. We are here to collect our people. Commander Killinara rushed to the communications center. Admiral, this is Academy Command. Your people are students under our protection. We demand an explanation for this military action. Commander Admiral Park's voice was patient but firm. Our students are no longer children playing at being soldiers. They are awakened guardians, and they are needed for the defense of this galaxy. The main viewing screen activated, showing the bridge of the flagship. Admiral Park appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of steady eyes that had seen too much war. Behind him, Tejo could see human officers working at control stations that looked impossibly advanced. Cadet Kim, Tejo, the Admiral said, looking directly through the screen. Please report to the shuttle bay. Your father is waiting to speak with you. The words hit Tejo like a physical blow. My father died when I was 12. Captain Lee Dong-Hein of Special Operations has been monitoring your progress, the Admiral continued. He's very proud of how well you handled your awakening. The shuttle bay was in chaos when Tejo arrived. Human transport ships were docking while Academy security tried to maintain order. Ginwoo was already there, looking confused and overwhelmed. A man in a black uniform stepped off one of the transports. He was tall and lean, with Tejo's eyes and the same quiet way of moving. Tejo's breath caught in his throat. Hello, son, Captain Lee said softly. You're supposed to be dead, Tejo whispered. Lee Dong-Hein died in a mining accident 12 years ago, his father agreed. But the man who has been watching over you since then, making sure you were ready for this day, he's very much alive. Tejo felt anger building in his chest. You let me think you were dead. You let me grieve. You let me join the academy thinking I was alone. I let you become the man you needed to be, his father replied. If you had known the truth, you would never have developed the strength to handle the awakening. You had to discover your true nature on your own. Before Tejo could respond, alarms began blaring again. This time, the sound was different, deeper, more urgent. "Perimeter breach," announced the Academy's computer. Unknown contacts approaching from galactic rim. The main display showed space beyond the Academy. Dark shapes were emerging from hyperspace. Ships that looked like they were made from black metal and shadow. They moved with purpose toward the inner systems. Devourers. Admiral Park's voice came through the communication system. "Advanced scouts. The main force won't be far behind." "Commander." Kilinara's voice was tight with fear. "Admiral, our combined fleets can't handle a full Devourer invasion. We need time to evacuate the core worlds." "There will be no evacuation," Admiral Park said firmly. "Humans don't run from fights we can win. You can't win." Kilinara protested. "The historical records show that the Devourers consume everything they encounter. They've destroyed entire galactic civilizations." "The historical records are incomplete," Admiral Park replied. "They don't mention that humans stopped them before." The viewing screen split to show multiple human fleets appearing throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been hidden for 1,000 years were powering up their weapons and moving to intercept the Devourer scouts. "How many ships do you have?" Dr. Halandra asked in amazement. "Enough," was Admiral Park's simple answer. Tejo watched the tactical display with growing understanding. The human ships weren't just randomly positioned. They were forming a perfect defensive grid around every populated system. It was a plan that had been in place for centuries, waiting for this moment. "You've been protecting us this whole time," Ralvin said quietly. The proud Orcs warrior was staring at the display with something like awe. "All these years we thought we were building our own defenses, but you were already there, watching." "Someone had to," Captain Lee said. "The galaxy is full of young species learning to cooperate and grow. When humans ruled before, we made the mistake of ruling from above. This time we chose to protect from the shadows." Ginwu stepped forward. "What happens now? Do we become conquerors again?" "That's the choice each awakened human has to make," Admiral Park said. "We can reclaim our empire and rule as we did before, or we can remain guardians, protecting others while they find their own strength." On the tactical display, the first battle was beginning. A small group of Devourer scouts engaged a human patrol fleet. The alien ships fought with terrifying efficiency, their weapons tearing through space itself. But the human ships moved like they were dancing, avoiding attacks that seemed impossible to dodge while returning fire with weapons that made stars flicker. Within minutes, the Devourer scouts were destroyed. "Impressive," Commander Kilinara said. "But that was just a scouting force. What happens when their main fleet arrives?" "Then we do what humans have always done," Tejo said, understanding flooding through him. "We adapt, we endure, and we protect. What matters?" He turned to face the assembled aliens, the same cadets and instructors who had spent weeks trying to break him, who had thought humans were primitive and weak. "You wanted to know what makes humans different," he said. "It's not our strength or our technology or our ability to survive. It's our choice to use that power to protect others instead of ourselves." The tactical display showed more human fleets, engaging Devourer forces across the galaxy. Each battle was a victory, but Tejo could see the pattern forming. The enemy was testing their defenses, learning their capabilities. "The real invasion will come soon," he said. "When it does, we'll need everyone, human and alien alike, working together." Ralvin stepped forward. "What do you need from us?" "Be what you've always been," Tejo replied. "Warriors, scientists, explorers, dreamers. Build the future you want to see. We'll handle the nightmares." Admiral Park nodded approvingly. "Well said. All human personnel, report to your assigned vessels. All alien personnel, return to your duties. The galaxy has work to do." As the human cadets began moving toward the transports, Tejo paused. He looked back at Commander Kilinara, at Dr. Halandra, at all the aliens who had tested and challenged him. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Kilinara asked. "For helping me remember who I really am." He walked toward his father's transport, no longer the uncertain boy who had arrived at the academy. He was something older now, something that carried the weight of civilizations on his shoulders. Behind him, the alien cadets watched the human ships disappear into hyperspace. They were alone again, but not truly alone. Somewhere in the darkness, between stars, ancient guardians were taking their positions. Preparing to stand between the galaxy and the void, the apex predator had awakened. But instead of hunting prey, it had chosen to hunt hunters. The cage was empty now. But not because the beast had escaped. The beast had simply remembered that cages were meant to keep dangers out, not keep guardians in. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the galactic rim, an ancient enemy was about to learn the difference between a sleeping human and an awakened one. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. But for the first time in 1,000 years, the children of the galaxy had their true parents standing watch, and humans had never been very good at letting their family get hurt.